Hello and welcome to this episode of the REBT Advocates with Dr. Michael R. Adelstein of 3minutetherapy.com. You can find his book co-authored by our current guest, Dr. David Ramsay Steele, 3-Minute Therapy, Change Your Thinking, Change Your Life at therebt.life, links below. And as I just said, we have the wonderful, brilliant Dr. David Ramsay Steele, author. Latest book is The Mystery of Fascism, the greatest hits of Dr. David Ramsay Steele, and Orwell, Your Orwell, a expert look, of George Orwell. Before we get started, we're going to talk about finances today, money, managing it rationally. But before we get started, Michael, do you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, I'm Dr. Michael Edelstein, co-author with David on 3-Minute Therapy. And I've 40 years experience helping people with rational emotive behavior therapy. And you can find my practice link and 3-Minute Therapy link in the description below.
Excellent.
Let me say a little more about David, since we work closely on two books. One is 3-Minute Therapy, and the other is Therapy Breakthrough. And David has written a number of other excellent books, as Tommy said, one on George Orwell and the Mystery of Fascism, collection of essays. He also wrote a very good book on atheism called Atheism Explained, one on economics from Marx to Mises. So David is somewhat of a Renaissance man, and we owe the interesting aspects of 3-Minute Therapy to David. I mainly contributed the REBT contents. So David, do you want to tell us briefly what anyone who is flat broke would know to help them build their finances?
Well, if you want to improve your financial situation, ultimately, except for miracles, there is only one way to do it, and that is to get a job, work, and save. Save means spend less than you earn. And if you do that, your financial situation will improve. I don't want to complicate it too much. There are many, many elaborate schemes and plans that you can develop on that basis, but that's the basic fact of life.
Yeah, and also just to fill in a little more there, when you get a job, it's important to get along with your boss and coworkers. So be positive, give a lot of positive feedback, be enthusiastic about your work, the job, and be on time. That's very important. Always arrive on time, and maybe work a little later than the average person to show your competence and conscientiousness, and to get good resumes, good recommendations for future jobs. So those are some of the basics.
Right, right. And people who are chronically unemployed are usually very deficient in very elementary skills like turning up on time, being able to do boring and uncomfortable chores without complaining, those kinds of skills. These are the basic skills. Uh, probably it's probably more important to learn basic good manners and punctuality than it is to learn code.
Yes. Yeah, and also being well groomed, well dressed, those kinds of things. Once you own the company, then you can go to work in jeans and a t-shirt. But at first, it's probably not a very good idea.
Right. I think that's a good piece of advice, although I must admit, looking back on my own life, I have rarely heeded it.
I see. Yeah.
Maybe why I'm not a millionaire.
Right. Right. Also, another basic principle is that in order to find a job, it may mean doing a lot of work and a lot of research. I think that these days it might be 3 to 6 months on average before people who are looking for a job find one. Do either of you know anything about those statistics?
No, it depends how demanding you are, of course. I mean, anybody can get a job, almost anybody can get a job in a day if they're really desperate. But it may not be a great job. In fact, it'd probably be a lousy job. So you're looking for something, you've got certain minimum requirements. It's probably going to take you 6 months to find a job that meets your minimum requirements.
Okay, so that's largely dealing with the practical problem. And as our regular viewers know, with REBT, we start with the problem separation technique. What is the practical problem and what is the emotional problem? So if you follow these principles, you'll probably do reasonably well with the practical problem, finding a job, keeping a job, and saving some money. But then as imperfect humans, you easily make yourself anxious, depressed, angry in relation to the job. And that's where your demands come in. Must, should, supposed to, such as life must not consist of one financial hassle after another. Or my unemployed situation must not be so unfair. Or the universe should supply me with a job and not have work to do to get one. So if you add that to the practical issues, then that could make it much more difficult to find and keep a job.
Right. That sounds good.
Any other thoughts about practical problems or working against that?
Well, I think there's an attitudinal question that we can talk about what you should do in order to get an income and to maximize your income and so on. But we should always remember there are other things going on in life, and there is no must about this. It's a bad idea to feel that you absolutely have to meet some financial goal. There are alternative demands upon your attention, and it's not necessarily the best thing for you, depending on your personality. It's not necessarily the best thing for you to become a money maker first and foremost. Some people have that kind of personality where they strive to make money, to become as well off financially as they can. Anybody who does adopt that, by the way, is likely to succeed. Anybody who's really doggedly persistent about making money is likely to make money. But you don't have to do that. And many of the most important people in history have been poor. Jesus, Socrates, Mozart, so there is absolutely no governing necessity that says that you have to become a moneymaker. And once you see that, you can view it objectively and dispassionately, and you can put it in its proper place. It's a matter of adopting certain habits and certain techniques that will help you.
Yes, and I wanted to say more about that as in terms of moneymaker. But before I do this, another thought in terms of the practical issue. There are many people who think when you look for a job or have a job, it's important to have a job you love. Now, if you think you have to have a job you love, that could severely handicap you in getting a job and keeping a job. And as Albert Ellis used to say, the purpose of a job is to have money, to make money from 9 to 5 to pay the rent and then enjoy 5 to 9. So there are many people who don't like the work, but they want the benefits of having the money. So they have a job that they don't really care for that much. So it's not a necessity that you love your work. And that would limit you in terms of finding a job if that's one of your criteria.
Yes. One thing that occurs to me, someone listening to this, I pitched my statement about how to make money as though you were unemployed or a street person. And of course, most people listening to this to this broadcast will already be making more than 50,000 a year. So that their problem is not getting out of the homeless shelter and getting themselves an apartment. They've done that, but they still find that they're miserable because they're plagued by financial anxieties. And of course, REBT shows the way to diminish such anxieties and to some extent get rid of them altogether. So it's very likely that you might want to hire a financial advisor to give you advice on your the precise state of your affairs and what you should do with any savings you have and that kind of thing. And you also might want to educate yourself a bit. There is a book actually called, I didn't write it, it's called All the Math You Need to Get Rich. Mathematics has all kinds of delightful and extremely difficult areas, but the math that is relevant to improving your financial situation is very, very simple. And it has just a few topics in math: percentages, rates of return, probabilities, just a few things like that that are extremely easy. So you can educate yourself in that kind of thinking. You'll know as much as Donald Trump about the math of business if you spend a bit of time learning those basic things. And you could get that book, All the Math You Need to Get Rich.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, David. And in terms of getting help in getting a job and getting rich, not only books like that one, but as David said, a financial advisor, a financial planner could help you. And also in terms of getting a job, there's a profession called recruiting. So recruiters help people get jobs. So that's another thing you can look into. One of the overall reasons people want to get a job, make money, and pay the rent is a larger goal, and that's to enjoy life. Now, many people believe that the more money you make, the happier you're going to get. But David, you wrote an essay on happiness. And one of the things I think you looked at was the relationship between making money and happiness. Is that right?
Well, yes. It was one of these articles that popularizes existing findings. So they weren't my original thoughts so much as, although I did have some original thoughts as well. But a large part of that particular article was just summarizing the findings of psychologists who have been researching into the causes of happiness, or as it's sometimes called among psychologists, subjective well-being, SWB. Not surprising, actually, when you read this literature, the find or read my article summarizing it, some of the findings go against folklore. They go against the kind of prejudices that, or the legends that people believe in. And one of the legends, of course, is that you can't buy happiness, that money can't buy you love and things like that. Well, actually, as you might expect, the research clearly shows that the higher your income, the happier you are on average. It doesn't mean there aren't some very happy people on very low incomes. There are, and it doesn't mean there aren't some thoroughly miserable people with very high incomes. There certainly are those too. But on average, higher income means that you're somewhat happier. That's one of the findings.
Yeah, another aspect of that, David, is people often believe if only I made more money, I'd be happy. Now, that's a little different from the kind of thinking you were talking about. If I made more money, I would be happier. But sometimes depressed people think, if only I made more money, I'd be happy.
Right.
And that does not bear out if you're unhappy because of your demands. I must make more money. I must keep up with the Joneses. I must get a Tesla like my neighbors. Those kinds of things. Making more money normally isn't going to do it. The first step would be to uproot the muss and show yourself that it would be preferable to make more money for some people some of the time, but it's not going to be the difference between happiness and misery, since, as we were saying earlier, misery comes from your demands, musts, and shoulds, not from your lack of money.
And I think hopping off of that, something to pay attention to. Now, David, you cited these studies that showed a correlation between happiness or subjective well-being and income, or the amount of money they had. Now, having REBT as kind of our presupposition that A doesn't cause C, that A flows through B, so the money doesn't cause the happiness. There's something in between. And I'm wondering if the things that help us generate higher levels of wealth also help us generate happiness, being our behaviors and attitudes, which are influenced directly by REBT and that type of thinking.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, anyone else? Tommy, David, anything else you'd like to add?
Well, it's interesting. So between this Dr. David Ramsay Steele and Dave Ramsey, who is a popular radio show host on
Yes.
when it comes to finances, I think y'all would both agree. And this article I read about Stoic approaching finances with Stoicism, which of course has a REBT as a corollary, would all say that money is not necessarily math and numbers, even though that's part of it, as David mentioned earlier with the book on math, but it's mostly behavior. In fact, it's overwhelmingly mostly behavior. And that's where we really need to get rational about our finances. I think we're more likely to enjoy wealth if we have our emotions under control and our behaviors under control than necessarily our math.
Absolutely. Yes.
Mm.
Oh, maybe I shouldn't say absolutely.
No, you can say
Relatively,
absolutely.
that's
In all probability. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, there we go.
Relatively, absolutely.
Relatively, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay, well, thank you, David. Again, our guest was Dr. David Ramsay Steele, co-author of 3-Minute Therapy, for joining us. And if you had any thoughts, comment below the video. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up and suggest subjects of interest to you. You're always welcome to volunteer to be on the program to discuss a problem or to get supervision if you're an REBT therapist or other therapist. And to help support us, donate to Patreon and subscribe to the REBT Advocates to stay on the rational side of life.